Last week, we got stuck on a project because three teams each had a different idea of what process meant. For operations, it was all about efficiency metrics. For IT, it was a flowchart and a ticketing system. That disconnect cost us hours.
That's such a common trap. In Six Sigma, the textbook says a process is just a set of activities that transforms inputs into outputs. But in HR, for example, process might mean onboarding paperwork or even the way feedback is delivered completely different flavor.
I remember my first job in a lab. I thought a process was just the experiment steps. But then the finance team started talking about process compliance, and I realized they meant something way broader, like approvals and documentation.
Here's the takeaway. If we don't get specific about what process means in context, teams end up talking past each other. That slows down problem solving and makes it tough to align on goals.
Absolutely. There's research showing that misalignment on basic terms like this can increase project delays by up to 30%. Even within the same company, definitions can drift between departments.
So, when you hear the word process, do you picture a checklist, a flowchart, or something else? I think everyone's mental image is shaped by their training or the first place they worked.
If we want smoother collaboration, it starts with clarifying these basics. Otherwise, we risk building solutions on top of misunderstandings. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how crucial it was to map every single input on the bottling line. Missing even one, like the CO2 for carbonation, meant the output wasn't just off-spec. It was unsellable.
That's the beauty of the Six Sigma approach. It forces you to define what goes in and what comes out in measurable terms. For example, in a typical beverage plant, you can track syrup concentration within 0.1% tolerance, and that's what keeps quality consistent across thousands of bottles.
But what about things like team morale or machine downtime? If we only focus on what's measurable, don't we risk ignoring factors that actually impact the process, even if they're harder to quantify?
That's a fair point. The Six Sigma model is powerful for identifying waste like excess bottle caps or syrup loss, but it can miss less tangible issues. For instance, a sudden spike in defects might trace back to operator fatigue, which isn't always captured in the input-output chart.
Still, the clarity it brings is hard to beat. When you can show that a 2% reduction in syrup waste saves $50,000 a year, it's much easier to justify process changes. But yes, it's not a catch-all. Some variables stay invisible.
So, would you say this definition works best in environments where most variables are physical and trackable, like manufacturing? What about creative industries or services?
Here's the takeaway. Six Sigma's process lens excels when you need precision and repeatability, especially in manufacturing. But if you rely solely on what's measurable, you might overlook the human or contextual factors that drive real improvement. Only after 2 iterations, we realized that our engineering and marketing teams had completely different definitions for process. For one, it meant a checklist. For the other, it was a series of approvals.
That's a classic disconnect. I've seen survey data showing that 68% of cross-functional projects stall because teams assume shared terminology, but never actually clarify it.
Can you explain how you finally got everyone on the same page? It sounds like just sending out a glossary wouldn't be enough.
We had to run a workshop where each department mapped out their process visually. It was eye-opening. People realized their pain points overlapped, even if their language didn't.
That's interesting because when expectations aren't aligned, improvement efforts can stall for months. There's a McKinsey study that found alignment upfront cuts project delays by 30%.
I partly agree. But what if teams still resist? Sometimes, even after clarifying terms, people hold on to their own way of working.
Here's the takeaway. Effective leaders have to act as translators, not just process experts. It's about bridging those worldviews so teams can actually move forward together. Only after 2 iterations, we realized that what HR calls a process, like hiring, spans way more departments than we expected. It's not just paperwork. It's marketing, interviews, compliance, and onboarding, all stitched together.
That's a great point. In IT, the process for something like change management is mapped out step by step: request, approval, testing, Deployment. According to a 2023 Gartner survey, over 60% of IT teams measure process success by how few incidents occur after deployment, so their output is stability, not just speed.
But what happens when those definitions clash? If HR wants flexibility for a unique candidate, but IT insists on strict protocols, doesn't that create friction? I wonder if that's why some projects stall.
Here's the takeaway. Different fields use process to mean different things, and their priorities, like consistency versus adaptability, can pull teams in opposite directions.
In scientific research, for example, a process is often a repeatable protocol. The output is reliable data, and any deviation can undermine the whole experiment. That's why labs document every step, even the temperature of the room.
But in services, like hotel check-in, the process is judged by the customer's experience. If the steps are too rigid, guests might feel frustrated, so sometimes flexibility actually improves the outcome.
It's a balancing act. When teams talk past each other about process, they risk missing the bigger picture. What's the real goal: efficiency, quality, or satisfaction?
Only after 2 iterations, we realized that our definition of process was completely different from the finance teams. They saw it as a checklist. We thought of it as a flexible framework.
That's so true. I always thought process meant a strict set of steps, but when I talked to marketing, they described it as more of a creative flow.
Here's the takeaway. The word process isn't one size fits all. If you assume everyone means the same thing, you're setting yourself up for confusion.
Actually, a recent internal survey showed that over 60% of employees couldn't agree on what process meant in their daily work. That's a big gap.
So maybe the next time we talk about improving a process, we should start by asking what everyone thinks it is first.
If you're listening, here's a gentle challenge. Pay attention to how you use the word process this week. Notice where it helps and where it might cause friction. Clearer language can make collaboration smoother. And if you're curious about what makes a process mature versus emerging, stay tuned for our next episode.